Ma'am, who gave your HOA permission to build that clubhouse on Mr. Tatum's property? Sheriff Martinez's question hit like a gunshot. Constance Whitfield, the clipboard tyrant who'd ruled our neighborhood for 27 years, went ghost white. The excavator operator killed the engine mid-swing. The bucket froze inches from my vines, hydraulic fluid dripping like blood. Half my Cabernet crop, 18 months of back-breaking work, Elena's ashes scattered between the rows, was already crushed into purple sludge across the driveway. The air stank of diesel and broken dreams. Constance thought she was teaching me a lesson about HOA rules. Instead, she just handed me a $180,000 lawsuit on a silver platter, because the clubhouse she'd been bragging about for years, built entirely on my property. She never checked the deed. Karma tastes like crushed grapes and sweet, sweet revenge. What would you do if they destroyed everything you loved? Drop your city below. I guarantee your HOA Karen makes Constance look like an angel. My name's Marcus Tatum, and 3 years ago I thought my life was over. 20 years as a Marine Corps combat engineer, then Elena, my wife, my anchor, my everything, lost her battle with cancer. The house felt like a tomb. That's how I ended up in Willowbrook Estates, a planned community outside Phoenix, where the lawns are perfect and the people definitely aren't. I bought 2.5 acres with this weird L-shaped boundary, some 1960s surveying screw-up that nobody cared about. Yet, Elena always dreamed about wine country, so I built her dream from scratch. 18 months of soil prep, custom irrigation, premium Cabernet and Pinot Noir varietals. I scattered her ashes between the rows. Every grape cluster was her living memorial. Then Constance Whitfield slithered into my paradise like a designer-dressed serpent with a clipboard addiction. Picture your worst HOA nightmare. Give her a real estate license and a god complex. Multiply by 27 years of unchecked power. Constance lived in the development's biggest house and drove her white Escalade like she was personally leading the homeowner association's war on fun. Her specialty? Making undesirable residents disappear faster than free donuts at a police station. Mrs. Patterson, 78-year-old widow, 14 violations in 2 years for excessive garden decorations. Apparently, lawn gnomes are a clear and present danger to property values. The Santos family with twin toddlers? Noise violations every time their kids played past 6 p.m., even though official quiet hours start at 10 p.m. The pattern was crystal clear. Harass until they move, then swoop in with her real estate license to sell to the right kind of buyers. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Steam from my coffee fogged the kitchen window as I read. Agricultural use violation, Section 7. 3. No commercial farming operations. $500 daily fines. Remove immediately. The morning air carried the click, click, click of my sprinkler system activating across the vineyard rows, a sound that had become my daily meditation. I called her office. Mrs. Whitfield, it's not commercial. It's a memorial for my deceased wife. Her voice could have frozen the Sahara. Mr. Tatum, I don't care if it's a memorial to Mother Teresa. Agriculture lowers property values and attracts the wrong element. 2 weeks. Remove it or we'll remove it for you. The wrong element. The diesel smell from nearby landscaping trucks mixed with grape leaf fragrance as my hands shook with rage. 20 years of military training kicked in. Analyze the enemy, find their weakness, plan their destruction. Constance thought she was dealing with another grieving veteran she could bully into submission. She had no idea I specialized in structural demolition, and after 27 years of unchecked power, she'd built her entire empire on a foundation that was about to crumble. The grapes were 2 weeks from harvest. I tested one. The juice burst on my tongue like liquid sunshine. Elena would have loved the sweetness. But here's what Constance didn't know about combat engineers. We don't just blow things up. We find the one critical support beam that brings down the entire structure, and I'd just found hers. See, while Constance was busy measuring grass heights with rulers and issuing violations for mailbox numbers that were slightly off beige, she'd gotten sloppy about the one thing that mattered most, legal documentation. 27 years of acting like she owned the entire neighborhood had made her forget to check whether she actually did. I spent the next morning spreading out every property document from my closing. Original deed, survey maps, title insurance. All the paperwork most homeowners stuff in a drawer and forget about. But military engineers don't forget about structural blueprints. That's when I noticed something very interesting about my property boundaries. The afternoon heat made my irrigation system hiss as it watered the vines. Each droplet caught the sunlight like tiny diamonds. Elena always said our garden would be magical. She just never mentioned it would also be weaponized. I picked up the phone and dialed the county recorder's office. "Hi, I need copies of all property surveys for Willowbrook Estates, dating back to original development." "That's a lot of paperwork, sir. Might take a few days." "I've got time," I said, watching Constance's Escalade cruise past my vineyard like a shark circling wounded prey. "All the time in the world." Because here's the thing about HOA dictators. They assume their authority is absolute. They never consider that someone might actually check their homework. And after 27 years of getting away with everything, Constance had forgotten the first rule of real estate. Location, location, location. More specifically, who actually owns what location? The HOA board meeting was scheduled for Thursday night, 7 p.m. sharp. Constance had called it an emergency session to address agricultural violations threatening community standards. Translation: public execution of Marcus Tatum's vineyard. I walked into that beige conference room knowing I was outnumbered. Constance had packed the audience with her usual suspects: Robert Sterling, Barbara Tatum, no relation, and a handful of residents who nodded along to whatever she said like dashboard bobbleheads in a paint mixer. The air conditioning wheezed overhead, mixing with nervous paper shuffling as Constance fired up her laptop. She'd prepared a full PowerPoint presentation titled "Preserving Property Values Through Agricultural Restrictions," because apparently my grape memorial needed the full corporate treatment. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, clicking to her first slide, "we're here to address a serious violation that threatens our community's character." The projector displayed photos of my vineyard, beautiful, healthy rows of grapevines that would have made Napa Valley jealous. She made it sound like I was operating a methamphetamine lab. "This commercial farming operation," she continued with the dramatic flair of a prosecutor announcing murder charges, "attracts pests, creates an unsightly industrial appearance, and fundamentally alters our neighborhood's residential nature." Jake Rodriguez, the retired high school teacher who lived 3 houses down, raised his hand. "Constance, how is growing grapes any different from Mrs. Patterson's tomato garden?" "Scale and commercial intent," she snapped. "Mr. Tatum clearly intends to profit from wine production, which violates Section 7.3 of our covenants." I stood up, keeping my voice steady despite wanting to throttle her with her own laptop cord. "I've never sold a single grape. This is a memorial garden for my deceased wife." Constance's smile could have flash-frozen Arizona in August. "Intention is irrelevant. Agricultural appearance violates our standards regardless of purpose." The board voted 4-1 to uphold the violation. Jake Rodriguez cast the lone dissent, looking genuinely apologetic. As residents filed out, muttering about property values and precedent setting, Jake slipped me his business card. "Call me," he whispered. "I've been treasurer for 3 years. There's stuff Constance doesn't want you to know. But first, I had my own digging to do." Friday morning found me at the Maricopa County Recorder's office, a building that smelled like old filing cabinets and the slow death of trees. The clerk, a woman whose enthusiasm for public service had clearly expired during the Bush administration, the first one, handed me a folder thick enough to stop small-caliber bullets. "Original Willowbrook Estates survey from 1965, she said. $40 for copies." I spread those yellowed maps across a table that wobbled like it had personally witnessed the Kennedy assassination. The brittle paper crackled under my fingers as I traced property lines with military precision. That's when I found it, the smoking gun. Buried in the legal description of my property was a 50-foot utility easement, recorded in 1965, running directly through what the HOA now called their common area. You know, that pristine strip of land where Constance parked her Escalade during board meetings, where they held annual barbecues and yoga classes. Yeah, technically mine. I remembered something from my engineering training about property law. Easements are like legal superpowers that trump later restrictions. When your deed grants specific rights recorded before HOA covenants existed, guess which one wins in court? Here's a hint. It's not the HOA. The afternoon sun filtering through my kitchen window made the grape leaves outside shimmer like green gold as I called Sarah Kim, an attorney Jake had recommended. Her consultation fee was $300, but after reviewing my paperwork, she practically purred with professional satisfaction. "You're absolutely right about that easement," she said. It predates HOA incorporation by 22 years. They can't restrict your use of your own property, especially not a memorial garden. What about their agricultural restrictions? Ornamental landscaping isn't agriculture, even if you're growing grapes. They'd have to prove commercial intent, and Elena's ashes scattered between the vines makes that impossible. But here's where it gets beautiful. While cross-referencing property lines, I discovered something that made my combat engineer heart sing with tactical joy. The HOA's precious clubhouse, their crown jewel where Constance held court like some suburban dictator, had been built partially on land that, according to the 1965 survey, belonged to me. Not the HOA, me. The irony tasted sweeter than perfectly ripe Cabernet. Constance had been conducting her reign of terror from my property for years without knowing it. Every violation she'd issued, every resident she'd bullied, every power trip she'd taken, all while literally standing on stolen ground. I filed my formal appeal that afternoon, citing the memorial nature of my vineyard and pre-existing easement rights. But I kept the clubhouse bombshell to myself. Sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't see coming. That evening, Jake called while I was testing grape sugar content. "Marcus, I've been reviewing our financial records since talking to you. Constance's husband's landscaping company has received over $40,000 in contracts from our HOA in the past 3 years. Want to guess who approves those expenditures?" The pieces clicked into place like a perfectly assembled explosive device. Constance thought she was fighting a simple zoning violation. She had no idea she'd just declared war on someone who discovered her entire kingdom was built on land she didn't own. Constance didn't take my appeal well. In fact, she took it about as gracefully as a rabid wolverine takes a bubble bath. Starting Monday morning, she launched what I can only describe as a harassment campaign that would have made the Spanish Inquisition jealous. Every day, at exactly 7 a.m., her white Escalade would cruise through our development like a suburban shark hunting for blood in the water. Tuesday, sprinkler system operating beyond permitted hours. Apparently, watering Elena's memorial at 8:15 a.m. violated some microscopic subsection that nobody else had ever heard of. Wednesday, excessive garden hose visibility creating unsightly appearance. My hose was coiled neatly behind a bush, but Constance had developed supernatural vision for detecting HOA violations. Thursday, mailbox numbers showing signs of weather fading. The numbers looked fine to me, but apparently she'd appointed herself the neighborhood's official typography inspector. The click, click, click of her designer heels during these daily inspections became my morning alarm clock, like a metronome keeping time for my growing anger. But Constance wasn't working alone. She'd pressured Barbara Tatum and Robert Sterling into filing coordinated noise complaints about my irrigation system. Barbara looked miserable when she handed me the complaint form, clearly acting under duress rather than conviction. "I'm sorry, Marcus," she whispered. She said if I didn't file this, she'd start finding violations on my property too. The beautiful thing about dictators is they always overplay their hand. While Constance was busy documenting my crimes with the dedication of a forensic investigator, I was conducting my own reconnaissance mission on our fearless leader. I'd installed a comprehensive security camera system to document her harassment patterns. High-definition footage of every trespassing incident, every fabricated violation, every illegal entry onto my property. But the cameras captured something even better than I'd hoped for. Every Tuesday and Thursday night, after dark, Constance would sneak onto my property with her phone, taking photos of my vineyard from different angles. Not from the street or sidewalk, actually crossing my property line to gather evidence for her enforcement case. The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast with a putty knife. Our HOA president, self-appointed champion of property rights and rule enforcement, was systematically violating the same laws she was trying to use against me. But wait, it gets better. During my own compliance inspection of the neighborhood, I discovered that Constance had been playing fast and loose with her own precious covenants. That backyard workshop where her husband stored landscaping equipment, 14 feet, 6 inches tall. Maximum allowed height, 12 feet. Her fence staining was Sahara tan instead of the required desert sand, a violation she'd cited 3 other residents for in the past year. And that commercial landscaping truck parked in her driveway overnight? Direct violation of Section 4.7. No commercial vehicles in residential driveways between sunset and sunrise. I remembered something crucial from my military legal training about HOA enforcement. When board members selectively enforce rules while ignoring identical violations on their own properties, it creates what lawyers call discriminatory application. Courts can void an HOA's entire enforcement authority if this pattern is documented properly. The key is proving systematic bias rather than random oversight. Jake Rodriguez confirmed my suspicions when we met for coffee that weekend. Marcus, I've been reviewing our financial records since your situation started. Constance's husband's landscaping company has received $47,000 in HOA contracts over 3 years. Guess who approves those expenditures without competitive bidding? The pieces were clicking into place like a perfectly timed explosive device. Constance wasn't just a power-hungry dictator. She was running a profitable family business disguised as community management. Harass residents into compliance while funneling HOA money to relatives. Classic corruption wrapped in suburban respectability. Meanwhile, she'd started her character assassination campaign throughout the neighborhood. I'd stop by Miller's Hardware and get cold shoulders from regular customers. Grocery store conversations would die when I approached. The poisonous whisper network was working overtime. Marcus Tatum is difficult, uncooperative, bad for property values. But every whispered conversation, every suspicious glance, every fabricated violation was just more evidence for the legal nuclear weapon I was quietly assembling in my home office. The sweet fragrance of ripening grapes drifted through my kitchen window that evening as I organized my evidence files. Constance thought she was fighting a simple agricultural violation case that she could win through persistence and intimidation. She had no idea she'd declared war on someone who specialized in finding structural weaknesses in enemy positions and exploiting them for maximum catastrophic damage. The taste of perfectly ripe Cabernet on my tongue reminded me why I was fighting. Not just for Elena's memorial, but for everyone Constance had bullied, silenced, or forced to flee over 27 years of unchecked suburban tyranny. She wanted escalation? She was about to get a masterclass in asymmetric warfare, courtesy of the United States Marine Corps. The certified letter arrived Tuesday morning like a financial suicide bomb. Special Landscape Restoration Assessment, $2,800. Payment due within 30 days or foreclosure proceedings will commence. I nearly choked on my coffee. The HOA board had held an emergency meeting Monday night to approve this nuclear option. According to their fabricated justification, my vineyard had caused environmental damage requiring professional soil remediation. Complete fiction, but fiction with foreclosure teeth. Jake Rodriguez called within the hour, voice tight with anger. Marcus, they gave me 47 minutes notice. Email sent at 8:47 p.m. for a 9 p.m. meeting. Constance, Robert Sterling, and Patricia Williams voted yes. I voted no. Barbara Tatum abstained, looked terrified the whole time. Based on what evidence? Photos of soil damage from your irrigation. Want to guess when those were taken? During her illegal trespassing sessions, of course. The woman had more nerve than a dentist with Parkinson's disease. But Constance wasn't done flexing her financial muscles. By noon, I discovered she'd launched a community-wide character assassination campaign. Miller's Hardware suddenly couldn't find my irrigation parts. The grocery store manager avoided eye contact. My mechanic started acting weird about routine service. The poison whisper network was working overtime. Marcus Tatum is difficult. Refuses community standards. Bad for property values. Systematic isolation through reputation destruction. A classic dictator playbook move. That's when our informal resistance really began forming. Mrs. Patterson showed up to our Desert Rose coffee meeting with a folder thick enough to stop bullets. 3 years of harassment documentation. Violation notices for unauthorized bird feeder placement, excessive Christmas light duration, lights already removed, and my personal favorite, non-conforming lawn ornament density. David and Maria Santos brought their own collection of absurdities. She measured our toddler's laughter with a decibel meter, Maria said, voice incredulous. Actual scientific equipment to prove 2-year-olds were too loud during quiet afternoon hours that don't even exist in our covenants. The coffee shop's afternoon crowd buzzed around us as we spread our evidence across 2 tables. The rich aroma of espresso couldn't mask the bitter taste of systematic oppression we were documenting. Carmen Williams, a retired teacher and the only Hispanic resident brave enough to openly oppose Constance, had perhaps the most damning evidence. Audio recordings of Constance explaining that properties owned by those people required enhanced oversight, due to concerning maintenance patterns. The pattern crystallized with mathematical precision: systematic targeting of elderly residents, families with children, minorities, anyone challenging Constance's narrow demographic vision. But while we compared battle scars over lattes, Jake dropped the real bombshell that changed everything. "Marcus, I've been conducting a full audit of our books. Constance has funneled $138,000 in HOA contracts to family businesses over 5 years. Her husband's landscaping, brother-in-law's pool service, cousin's security company, nephew's supply business. Zero competitive bidding, zero transparency." I remembered something crucial from my military finance training about municipal corruption. When public officials direct contracts to family members without competitive bidding, it creates what's called nepotism fraud, grounds for voiding their authority entirely while triggering criminal investigations. This wasn't just harassment anymore. Constance was operating the HOA like her personal ATM machine, converting residents' fees into her extended family's business profits through fraudulent contract awards. But here's where she made her most fatal mistake. 27 years of unchallenged power had bred dangerous overconfidence. David Santos had recorded her during a heated pool area confrontation, where she declared that certain types of families were fundamentally incompatible with maintaining community standards. Carmen captured even worse. Constance explaining to another resident that minority homeowners statistically showed problematic maintenance behaviors, requiring preventive enforcement measures. Fair housing violations don't get much more explicit than that. Meanwhile, my military-grade security system was documenting Constance's own covenant violations with forensic precision. Her husband's commercial landscaping truck parked illegally overnight, 17 documented instances. Her backyard workshop exceeding height restrictions by 30 inches. Her fence stained with prohibited Sahara tan instead of required desert sand. Every single violation of the same rules she enforced against others with prosecutorial zeal. 7 households now represented our growing coalition, nearly 40% of the entire development, all armed with documented evidence of systematic harassment, financial corruption, and discriminatory enforcement practices. But I still had one final card to play: the thermonuclear option that would make her $2,800 assessment look like pocket change. Because while Constance was attempting to bankrupt me with fabricated environmental fines, she remained blissfully unaware that her precious clubhouse, the crown jewel and power center of her HOA kingdom, was constructed entirely on property she didn't legally own. Property that, according to the 1965 survey moldering in county records, belonged exclusively to me. The sweet scent of grape blossoms drifted through the coffee shop's open windows as our resistance meeting concluded. Constance thought she was systematically destroying my finances and community standing through coordinated warfare. She was actually providing me with the perfect conditions to ferment an absolutely devastating revenge. Elena always said the finest wines emerged from vines that survived the harshest adversity. The taste of perfectly ripe grapes on my tongue that evening reminded me exactly why I was fighting. Not merely for my memorial garden, but for every single person Constance had terrorized, bullied, and driven away over her 27-year reign of suburban tyranny. The financial war was about to escalate into a property rights nuclear strike, and our neighborhood dictator had unknowingly built her entire empire on land that legally belonged to her greatest enemy. The professional surveyor's report arrived on a Friday morning that would forever divide my life into before and thermonuclear option. I had hired Thompson & Associates, the same firm the county used for official boundary disputes, to conduct a comprehensive property assessment of my lot and surrounding HOA areas. What they found made me want to frame the documents and hang them next to Elena's photo. Jake Rodriguez sat across from me at my kitchen table, coffee growing cold as we spread the certified survey maps across the wooden surface. The morning light streaming through windows made the technical drawings shimmer like treasure maps, which, legally speaking, they were. "Holy cow, Marcus," Jake whispered, tracing property boundary lines with his finger. "This goes way beyond your vineyard." He was absolutely right. The survey confirmed my suspicions from those dusty county records, but the scope was breathtaking. According to original 1965 boundaries, I legally owned 1/3 of the HOA clubhouse, the entire pool deck, the storage shed, 12 parking spaces, and a strip of prime real estate where Constance held her precious annual barbecues and mandatory community improvement meetings. The HOA had been operating revenue-generating facilities on my property for 36 years without legal ownership. The smell of fresh ink on the survey documents, mixed with grape blossom fragrance, drifting through open windows. Elena would have loved this cosmic justice. Property value of illegally occupied land, $180,000, confirmed by Morrison Real Estate Assessments. But here's the beautiful part that made my engineer's heart sing. I'd been paying property taxes on this land the entire time. 36 years of county records proving that while the HOA collected maintenance fees from residents for common area upkeep, I was personally funding the government for the privilege of owning the ground their facilities sat on. The legal implications were staggering enough to make a constitutional lawyer weep with joy. The HOA had zero standing to enforce any rules on property they didn't actually own. Their insurance policy didn't cover structures built on non-HOA land, creating massive liability exposure for every board member. Every maintenance fee they'd collected constituted unjust enrichment, legally sanctioned theft spanning decades. Sarah Kim arrived an hour later with her briefcase and the predatory smile of someone who'd just discovered King Tut's tomb. Marcus, this is the most gorgeous property rights case I've encountered in 15 years of practice. What are our options? Every single one imaginable, she said, spreading legal documents across my table like playing cards in a winning hand. Civil lawsuit for 36 years of illegal occupation, unjust enrichment claims for maintenance fees, immediate injunction against HOA enforcement. We could force complete dissolution if we wanted to go thermonuclear. How did this happen? Jake asked, studying the 1987 HOA incorporation papers. How do you accidentally build on someone else's property? Sarah's expression turned positively Wolverine-like. It wasn't accidental. These incorporation documents deliberately altered property descriptions without legally acquiring the land. Someone in 1987 knew exactly what they were doing. They gambled nobody would ever verify the original surveys. The implications crashed over me like a tsunami of pure justice. Every violation Constance had issued, every fine imposed, every resident bullied into submission, all while literally conducting business on property stolen through fraudulent paperwork. But I made a strategic decision worthy of military tactical planning. Instead of immediately deploying this legal nuclear weapon, I chose patience over instant gratification. The grapes were 10 days from harvest. Elena's memorial was almost ready for its first vintage. Constance wanted to destroy it with heavy machinery? Perfect. She'd be committing property destruction on my land, without permission, creating criminal charges that would make her harassment campaign look like littering. Sarah, prepare 3 separate legal actions, I said, already tasting sweet victory. Civil property theft lawsuit, criminal fraud referral, and emergency injunction papers. But don't file anything until I give the word. When will that be? When Constance sends her excavator to destroy Elena's vines. I want her committing crimes on camera, in front of witnesses, while standing on land she stole from me 36 years ago. Jake stared at me with something approaching religious awe. You're not just stopping her harassment, you're about to obliterate her entire operation. The afternoon sun illuminated those survey maps like ancient scrolls, revealing divine retribution. Constance had spent 27 years building her empire of suburban tyranny on a foundation of lies and stolen property. In 10 days, that foundation would crumble beneath the treads of her own excavator. Saturday morning found Sarah Kim and me in full war room mode. My dining room table transformed into a tactical command center that would have made Pentagon planners weep with envy. Coffee cups, legal documents, survey maps, and evidence folders covered every surface like pieces of an elaborate puzzle designed to obliterate Constance Whitfield's existence. The rich aroma of Colombian dark roast, mixed with grape blossoms drifting through open windows. Elena would have loved watching me plot strategic warfare from her favorite breakfast spot. The beauty of this case, Sarah said, highlighting property law sections with surgical precision, is that we're not fighting simple harassment. We're exposing systematic fraud spanning decades. Our strategy was elegantly devastating. Let Constance proceed with her excavator threat, while secretly preparing legal annihilation that would make atomic bombs look like birthday sparklers. The goal had evolved beyond stopping harassment. We were dismantling an entire corruption network and recovering stolen property. Jake Rodriguez arrived with 3 bankers' boxes of HOA financial records, looking like Santa Claus if Santa specialized in delivering evidence of embezzlement. The musty smell of decades-old paperwork couldn't mask the stench of financial corruption we were exposing. "Here's what really burns my bacon," Jake said, spreading invoices across the table. "Constance's husband charged us $4,200 to repair irrigation damage last spring. Want to guess where that damage was located?" "On my property," I said, examining work orders that would have made fiction writers proud. "Exactly. We paid her family business to fix problems on land that legally belongs to you. Then she tried to fine you for causing them. It's like charging someone rent for their own house, then evicting them for living there." The financial records revealed corruption sophisticated enough to impress organized crime accountants. Constance's extended family had turned our HOA into their personal ATM. Husband's landscaping, $73,000. Brother-in-law's pool maintenance, $31,000. Cousin's security services, $19,000. Nephew's emergency repairs, $12,000. Total family profits from rigged contracts, $157,000 over 5 years, all rubber-stamped by the woman controlling HOA finances. I remembered something from military anti-corruption training about systematic contract fraud. When public officials direct business to family members without competitive bidding, prosecutors call it conspiracy to defraud, and penalties include both criminal charges and civil asset forfeiture of all profits. Sarah was assembling our legal artillery with methodical precision. Civil lawsuit for property theft, criminal fraud referrals, potential RICO conspiracy charges, emergency injunctions to freeze HOA assets, and personal liability claims against every participating board member. But we needed community support and media coverage to ensure maximum public destruction when everything detonated. Mrs. Patterson had become our intelligence chief, documenting Constance's harassment with the dedication of a war crimes investigator. Her evidence included photographs of every violation notice, timestamps of trespassing incidents, and a detailed journal spanning 3 years of systematic abuse. "She cited me for the same lawn gnome 14 times, Mrs. Patterson said, hands trembling with rage. Measured its position with a ruler, moved it 2 inches, then claimed it violated different covenant sections." David and Maria Santos had compiled audio recordings of discriminatory comments, photographs proving selective enforcement, and documentation of Constance pressuring neighbors into filing false complaints. Their playground equipment was identical to 3 others. Guess which family got cited? Carmen Williams had conducted demographic analysis that would make civil rights lawyers salivate. 23 households cited in 2 years. 21 were elderly residents, families with children, or minorities. The exceptions? Constance's neighbors who hired her husband's business. The discrimination pattern was so obvious it practically prosecuted itself. My security footage provided crown jewel evidence. 67 instances of Constance trespassing to photograph violations. 17 videos of her husband's illegal commercial parking. 8 recordings of Constance violating every rule she enforced against others. We were building a case that would make prosecutors fight over handling rights. Jim Wade from Willowbrook Weekly had agreed to cover my harvest celebration Tuesday morning, same day as Constance's planned excavation. He thought he was documenting a feel-good community story. He had no idea he was about to witness the most spectacular suburban meltdown since HOAs were invented. Sheriff Martinez understood the situation. Potential criminal trespassing, property destruction, and fraud charges dating back decades. Everything would be perfectly legal and perfectly devastating. Sunday evening, Sarah finished our legal strike package. The documents sat on my counter like loaded weapons. 3 lawsuits, 2 criminal referrals, emergency injunctions that would freeze every HOA account and suspend all enforcement authority. "Marcus," Sarah said, organizing final papers. "When this detonates, Constance faces criminal charges, civil penalties, and personal bankruptcy. Multiple family members could be indicted for conspiracy." The weight of impending destruction settled over me like evening shadows. We weren't just stopping harassment, we were obliterating multiple lives, businesses, and reputations. But I stepped outside and touched Elena's memorial roses, breathing in sweet grape fragrance. I thought about Mrs. Patterson's shaking hands, children afraid to play in their yards, families driven from homes by systematic abuse. 27 years of unchecked tyranny, decades of stolen property and fabricated authority. The taste of perfectly ripe grapes reminded me that justice, like fine wine, requires patience but delivers satisfaction worth the wait. Tuesday morning couldn't arrive fast enough. Monday morning brought news that Constance had officially lost whatever remained of her rational mind. Jake Rodriguez called at 7:30 a.m., voice tight with disbelief that our HOA president had jumped the shark into criminal territory. "Marcus, you won't believe what she tried last night. She called Tony Vasquez, the excavator operator, and offered him $500 cash to accidentally cause extra damage during tomorrow's removal. Please tell me you have proof." Better. Tony recorded it. Constance has been harassing his family's business with bogus permit complaints for months. He's tired of her games and wants to see her go down. The beautiful thing about tyrants is they eventually make enemies of everyone, including people they need most. Constance's 27-year reign had created a network of potential witnesses who'd gladly testify when opportunity arose. But her desperation was just getting started. By noon, the neighborhood gossip network buzzed with Constance's latest fiction. Marcus Tatum was under county health investigation for illegal agricultural chemical runoff, supposedly contaminating groundwater and threatening children's safety. Complete fabrication, naturally, but damaging enough that 3 neighbors called expressing concern about their kids playing near my property. Mrs. Patterson knocked on my door around 2 p.m., looking more worried than I'd ever seen her. "Marcus, Constance stopped by claiming she had evidence that your grape chemicals were making people sick. Wanted me to sign a petition demanding immediate excavation for public safety." "What did you tell her?" "That the only thing making me sick was listening to her lies for 3 years. Mrs. Patterson's smile was pure steel wrapped in grandmotherly sweetness. "But she's getting desperate. Desperate people do dangerous things." She was absolutely right. That evening, my security cameras captured something that crossed from harassment into felony territory. At 2:47 a.m., Constance's white Escalade crept through our development with headlights off, parking 3 houses away. She emerged wearing dark clothing, carrying a spray bottle, skulking toward my vineyard like some suburban ninja with a chemistry set. I watched from my bedroom window as she systematically poisoned 12 grapevines with concentrated herbicide. The acrid smell of chemical death drifted through night air as she worked, destroying months of growth in minutes. Here's where military training proved invaluable. I didn't intervene, didn't confront her, didn't call police immediately. Instead, I let her complete her sabotage mission, while cameras documented every second in high-definition glory. Sometimes the best evidence is evidence your enemy doesn't know you're collecting. She left behind the empty herbicide container, with her fingerprints all over it. The woman had escalated from HOA harassment to criminal property destruction, providing me with felony charges to add to my growing legal arsenal. But Constance wasn't done digging her own grave. Tuesday morning, the day of reckoning, she made her final, fatal mistake by filing a false police report. At 6 a.m., Sheriff Martinez called informing me that Constance had reported a threatening incident where I'd allegedly cornered her during routine property inspection and made verbal threats about making her pay for enforcing community standards. "Mr. Tatum, I'm required to investigate, but given our previous conversations about the property situation, I'm approaching this with appropriate skepticism. Sheriff, I haven't spoken to Constance face-to-face in 2 weeks, but I have security footage covering every inch of my property during the time frame she claims this happened. Bring the footage when we meet this morning. False police reports are felony charges, and I don't appreciate having my time wasted with fabricated crimes." The irony was thick enough to mine like precious ore. Constance was filing false reports about threats, while actively committing real crimes against my property. She'd escalated from petty harassment to criminal sabotage to fraudulent police reports, a trifecta of felony charges that would make prosecutors weep with joy. Meanwhile, my resistance network had been building community support for the upcoming confrontation. Carmen Williams had quietly spread word among sympathetic neighbors that something important was happening Tuesday morning. Mrs. Patterson had invited friends from her bridge club to witness the harvest celebration. Even Barbara Tatum, previously coerced into filing noise complaints, had privately reached out to express support. "Marcus, half the neighborhood is rooting for you. Constance has made too many enemies over the years." The sweet scent of ripening grapes filled my kitchen as I prepared for final battle. Elena's memorial was about to become the site where justice finally caught up with 27 years of unchecked tyranny. Tony Vasquez had agreed to proceed with excavation as scheduled, knowing my attorney would immediately serve legal papers stopping actual destruction. His job? Show up, start the engine, provide dramatic backdrop for Constance's complete public humiliation. Everything was positioned perfectly. Legal papers ready for service. Sheriff Martinez briefed on property fraud situation. Media coverage arranged under community interest story guise. Security cameras rolling to capture every moment of Constance's downfall. The taste of perfectly ripe grapes reminded me that some victories are worth waiting for. Tomorrow morning, Constance Whitfield would finally face consequences of building her empire on stolen land and fabricated authority. She wanted to destroy Elena's memorial with heavy machinery? Perfect. She'd be committing criminal trespassing and property destruction on my land, in front of witnesses, while standing on ground she'd illegally occupied for 36 years. Military strategists call it allowing your enemy to defeat themselves through overconfidence. I called it justice served ice cold with a side of sweet, sweet revenge. Tuesday morning, 7:30 a.m. The rumble of diesel engines shattered suburban peace like thunder announcing the apocalypse. I watched from my kitchen window as Tony Vasquez guided his massive excavator through our development, a 40,000-pound yellow beast with a bucket big enough to swallow a smart car. Constance arrived in her white Escalade, practically vibrating with anticipation. She'd brought Robert Sterling as backup, dressed like she was heading to a real estate closing instead of authorizing destruction of a war widow's memorial. "Mr. Vasquez," she called out, stiletto heels clicking like a countdown timer. "Begin with the eastern section, complete removal of all agricultural plantings and irrigation equipment." The excavator roared to life as neighbors emerged from their homes, some drawn by noise, others because word had spread that something significant was happening this morning. I rushed outside in my bathrobe, playing the desperate victim perfectly. "Wait, please, I just need one more week to harvest. They're almost ready." Constance's smile could have powered Vegas. "Mr. Tatum, you've had months to comply. The time for delays has expired. Tony, proceed." The bucket bit into Arizona soil with a wet, crunching sound. Rich earth mixed with irrigation water, as Tony systematically destroyed the outer grape rows, avoiding the memorial roses where Elena's ashes were scattered. Purple juice stained concrete like spilled wine as grape clusters scattered. The sweet smell of crushed fruit mixed with diesel exhaust. A sensory cocktail capturing 18 months of destroyed dreams. But here's where Constance's overconfidence became fatal. She was live streaming everything on the HOA Facebook page. "Finally enforcing community standards," she announced to her phone camera. "This is what happens when residents think they're above the rules, maintaining our property values." 20 minutes of systematic destruction, $8,000 in mature vines and custom irrigation, reduced to purple sludge. Constance documenting every moment for social media, completely unaware she was creating evidence for multiple felony charges. Mrs. Patterson watched from her porch, hands clenched into fists. Carmen Williams positioned herself in her driveway with a clear view. David Santos recorded everything on his phone, knowing this footage would be crucial evidence. The mechanical roar echoed off surrounding houses as Tony continued his careful destruction. He'd agreed to this charade, knowing my attorney would immediately halt actual damage, but the theater needed to look convincing for Constance's benefit. At 8:15 a.m., Sheriff Martinez's patrol car appeared, emergency lights flashing. The excavator died to sudden silence as Tony shut down, hydraulic fluid dripping from the suspended bucket like mechanical blood. I'd texted 15 minutes earlier. "Active property destruction in progress. Come now." Constance looked confident, believing law enforcement would support HOA authority over some troublesome veterans' violations. She straightened her blazer, prepared to explain legitimate community standards enforcement. Sheriff Martinez approached with the measured pace of someone who'd seen enough municipal bullshit to last lifetimes. His hand rested casually on his duty belt as he surveyed the destruction, gathered neighbors, and Constance's smartphone live streaming to 47 viewers. "Ma'am," he said, making direct eye contact with Constance, "I need to see your authority to conduct excavation on this property." "Of course, Sheriff. I'm Constance Whitfield, HOA President. We're enforcing Section 7.3 regarding agricultural restrictions." She produced violation notices with the confidence of someone presenting royal decrees. And who owns this property where you're excavating? The homeowner, Marcus Tatum, but the HOA has enforcement authority over... Ma'am, I'm going to stop you right there. Sheriff Martinez's voice carried the weight of legal authority about to crush someone's world. Mr. Tatum, do you have those documents we discussed? I stepped forward, no longer playing desperate victim, and handed him the manila folder containing 36 years of explosive evidence. Survey maps, property deeds, tax records, documentation that would transform Constance's confident smile into pure terror. The sheriff studied documents for exactly 3 minutes, while the crowd held its breath. Tony nervously wiped his hands, sensing something was about to go catastrophically wrong. Constance's live stream continued broadcasting to a growing audience who had no idea they were witnessing legal history. Robert Sterling shifted uncomfortably, probably wondering why he'd agreed to witness what was supposed to be routine rule enforcement. The morning air carried distant traffic sounds, mixing with the metallic cooling of the excavator engine. Constance's phone continued recording, capturing her moment of supreme confidence for posterity. 47 viewers had grown to 63, with comments starting to appear questioning the legality of the excavation. The destroyed grapevines lay scattered across concrete, like casualties of war, their purple juice creating abstract patterns that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. The sweet scent of crushed fruit mixed with diesel fumes and disturbed soil, creating an oddly poetic atmosphere for what was about to become the most spectacular legal takedown in suburban history. Then Sheriff Martinez looked up from the folder, made direct eye contact with Constance, and asked the question that would obliterate her existence. Ma'am, who gave your HOA permission to build that clubhouse on Mr. Tatum's property? The silence that followed was so absolute, you could hear grape juice dripping onto concrete 40 feet away. Ma'am, who gave your HOA permission to build that clubhouse on Mr. Tatum's property? Sheriff Martinez's question hit like a lightning bolt striking a powder magazine. Constance Whitfield's face transformed from smug confidence to ghost-white terror in exactly 2.3 seconds. I know because David Santos was recording everything in slow motion. The silence stretched so long I could hear my own heartbeat. 63 Facebook viewers had become 97, comments exploding across the live stream as people sensed they were witnessing something extraordinary. That's impossible, Constance stammered, her voice cracking like thin ice under pressure. The clubhouse is on HOA common area. It's been there for 36 years. Sheriff Martinez held up the survey documents like he was presenting evidence in a murder trial. According to this 1965 property survey, certified by the county and cross-referenced with current tax records, that clubhouse sits entirely on Mr. Tatum's legally recorded property boundaries. Those documents must be forged. Constance's voice rose to a shriek that could have shattered windows. He obviously paid someone to fake those papers. The sheriff's expression could have flash-frozen the Sahara. Ma'am, these are official county records. Are you suggesting the Maricopa County Recorder's Office is involved in document fraud? But the evidence avalanche was just getting started. Jake Rodriguez stepped forward from the growing crowd of neighbors, carrying his own folder of financial documents. Sheriff, I'm the HOA treasurer. Constance has been approving contracts to her family's businesses without competitive bidding. Total payments over 5 years, $157,000. That's perfectly legal, Constance snapped, but sweat was beading on her forehead despite the cool morning air. Not when those businesses operated on property she didn't own, Sarah Kim announced, appearing like a legal angel of death with her briefcase. I'm Mr. Tatum's attorney. We have documentation showing systematic fraud, property theft, and unjust enrichment spanning decades. The crowd was growing larger by the minute. Mrs. Patterson had called her Bridge Club friends. Carmen Williams had texted the neighborhood watch group. Even residents from other developments were arriving after seeing the Facebook live stream go viral. Tony Vasquez, the excavator operator, chose that moment to drop his own bombshell. Sheriff, Mrs. Whitfield offered me $500 yesterday to cause extra damage during this excavation. I recorded the conversation. Constance's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. He's lying. I have the recording right here on my phone, Tony said, pulling out his device. Want to hear it? But Sheriff Martinez had seen enough evidence to sink a battleship. Mrs. Whitfield, I'm placing you under arrest for criminal trespassing, vandalism, and filing false police reports. You have the right to remain silent. "This is insane," Constance screamed, her voice echoing off surrounding houses. "On possibly property values for 27 years. You can't arrest me for enforcing community standards." "Ma'am," the sheriff said while fitting handcuffs, "you can't enforce standards on property you don't legally own." That's when I delivered my mic drop moment. "Constance," I said, loud enough for the 97 live stream viewers and 30 gathered neighbors to hear clearly. "Next time you want to destroy someone's memorial to their dead wife, maybe make sure you actually own the land you're standing on first." The crowd erupted in applause. Mrs. Patterson was literally cheering. David Santos pumped his fist in the air. Even Robert Sterling was shaking his head in disgust at Constance's complete meltdown. But the humiliation crescendo was still building. Carmen Williams stepped forward with her phone. "Sheriff, I have recordings of Mrs. Whitfield making discriminatory comments about minority residents requiring enhanced oversight due to their ethnicity." "Fair housing violations," Sarah Kim added helpfully. "Federal crime." As Sheriff Martinez guided Constance toward his patrol car, she made one final, desperate attempt to salvage her dignity. "You people don't understand what I've sacrificed to maintain property values in this community." Sheriff Martinez paused at the car door. "Ma'am, what you've done is operate facilities on stolen land for 36 years, while terrorizing residents through illegal harassment." The Facebook livestream peaked at 127 viewers as Constance was loaded into the back seat, her perfectly styled hair disheveled, her designer blazer wrinkled. Her reign of terror officially ended in front of a digital audience that would preserve her humiliation forever. Tony Vasquez approached me with genuine remorse. "Mr. Tatum, I'm sorry about your vines. I can repair that irrigation damage for free, and I know a guy who specializes in grapevine restoration." "Don't worry about it, Tony. Those vines served their purpose perfectly." Jim Wade from the Willowbrook Weekly was frantically taking notes, realizing he'd stumbled onto the biggest local story of the decade. "Mr. Tatum, would you be willing to comment on—" "The only comment I have," I said, watching the patrol car disappear with our former neighborhood dictator, "is that Elena always said the best wine comes from grapes that survive adversity. Today proved her right." The sweet scent of crushed grapes mixed with diesel exhaust and the metallic smell of justice finally served. After 27 years of unchecked tyranny, Constance Whitfield's empire had crumbled in exactly 47 minutes of public testimony. As the crowd dispersed and the excavator was loaded onto its trailer, I stood among the scattered remains of my memorial vineyard and smiled. Elena would have loved watching that arrogant bully get exactly what she deserved. Sometimes the best revenge really is justice, served ice cold in front of a live streaming audience. 1 week after Constance's spectacular meltdown, our HOA held an emergency meeting that felt more like a liberation celebration. Jake Rodriguez was elected interim president by unanimous vote. Even former Constance allies couldn't distance themselves fast enough from her toxic legacy. "First order of business," Jake announced. "Full financial transparency. Every contract and expenditure gets posted online within 48 hours. The applause was thunderous. Mrs. Patterson actually stood and cheered like she was at a World Series game. Constance's consequences came down like an avalanche of overdue karma. Criminal charges, $5,000 fines, 200 hours community service, lifetime HOA management ban, real estate license suspended for discriminatory practices, civil settlement, $150,000 plus permanent easement rights, and a written apology I framed next to Elena's photo. But the sweetest justice was watching her empire crumble. 6 major clients dropped her after the viral arrest video. Her husband's landscaping company lost $35,000 in annual contracts when other HOAs discovered the nepotism scandal. Their house hit the market 6 weeks later, price reduced twice, still unsold. The ripple effect spread county-wide. Willowbrook Weekly's investigative series triggered investigations of 12 other developments. State Representative Tom Bradley introduced the Homeowner Protection Act, citing my case as evidence that current laws inadequately protect residents from board abuse. I became an unofficial consultant for residents fighting HOA overreach across Arizona. Daily calls with eerily similar stories. Elderly widows harassed over garden decorations. Families cited for children's laughter. Minorities targeted with selective enforcement. Despite 30% vine loss, I completed a successful harvest. Adversity had concentrated the grape's sugars. Elena always said the best wine comes from surviving hardship. I produced 180 bottles labeled Justice Vintage 2024, Elena's Memorial Reserve. The Sonoran Wine Enthusiast Club bought the entire batch for $6,200, funding the Elena Tatum Memorial Scholarship for military spouses pursuing engineering degrees. First recipient, Maria Santos, who'd abandoned civil engineering studies when the twins were born. With my $30,000 settlement, I converted the destroyed vineyard section into a community memorial garden. Raised beds for vegetables and herbs, meditation benches facing the mountains, fruit trees that would feed families for generations. Mrs. Patterson planted tomatoes beside my restored vines. Carmen Williams started an herb garden supplying half the neighborhood with fresh cilantro. The Santos twins built fairy houses among flowers, their laughter finally welcome in their own backyard. Every Saturday, volunteers gathered to tend the garden. Jake taught composting. David installed drip irrigation. Even former Constance supporters like Barbara Tatum showed up with genuine apologies and gardening gloves. Our annual Harvest Justice Festival draws hundreds from across the valley. Local attorneys volunteer free property rights consultations. Veterans organizations provide benefit information. Sheriff Martinez gives standing room-only presentations about documenting harassment for law enforcement. 10 months after Constance's downfall, Sarah Kim and I started dating. She'd handled my case pro bono, saying she'd never done more satisfying legal work. Elena would have approved. Sarah was brilliant, kind, and laughed at my terrible engineering jokes. 2 years later, I'm standing in a rebuilt vineyard stretching across my full 3.2 confirmed acres. The 2026 vines bud with spring promise as Sarah helps install expanded irrigation for the community garden, where children play and neighbors share vegetables. Jake stops by monthly with transparency reports showing healthy HOA finances, fair enforcement, and zero family business contracts. 3 residents have successfully challenged previous Constance violations using my precedent, recovering thousands in bogus fines. Where Constance's clubhouse once sat, we built an expanded community center with legal aid clinic, veterans resource center, and meeting spaces available regardless of HOA membership. The sweet scent of grape blossoms mingles with memorial roses as Sarah emerges with morning coffee, her hair catching sunlight like spun gold. The scholarship committee called, she says, settling beside me. This year's Elena Tatum Memorial recipient is studying structural engineering at ASU. Full ride, all expenses. Elena would be proud, I say, touching her memorial plaque. She believed in building things that last. 3 military widow scholarships funded. Community garden feeding dozens. Legal workshops protecting hundreds from HOA abuse. Property values actually increased once Constance's terror ended, and people felt safe in their neighborhood. Justice really tastes like fine wine. Complex, satisfying, and better when shared with good people fighting the same fights. So that's how a retired Marine engineer turned HOA harassment into a $150,000 payday and community revolution. Drop a comment sharing your worst HOA nightmare story. I read every single one, and Elena's legacy proves bullies can be beaten with patience, evidence, and the right legal strategy. And if you want to see how I helped my neighbor stop his fence dispute costing him $200 monthly in fines, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell. Justice tastes best when shared with people who refuse to let petty tyrants win.
That's all for today's HOA madness. If watching justice serve itself made your day, smash that like button, share your thoughts down below, and make sure you're subscribed. More outrageous neighborhood showdowns are just around the corner.